Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back, guys. I'm back with Claudine, and today we're talking about the apartments in the Louvre that belong to Anne of Austria, and they are beautiful. Maybe you haven't found them because maybe they're hard to find. They're inside the Louvre, which is huge, but Claudine's going to tell us more.
Yeah, and sadly, if you haven't seen these, by the time you're listening to this, you will be waiting to see them for a few years, and I'll tell you why. But Anne of Austria, to give you a little bit of a backing, if you've listened to some episodes recently, I mention her every once in a while. Two of the biggest projects I've been working on at times interlace with each other, which is great, but also gets confusing. But Anne of Austria, she was a queen. She was the Infanta of Spain, an eldest daughter of King Philip II of Spain and Marguerite d'Autriche, Austria, a branch of the House of the Habsburgs. She was raised in a very religious chateau. At 11 years old, she was betrothed to Louis XIII, and the two were married when she was just 14 years old. Their wedding night included his mother, Marie de Medici, standing over their bed waiting for them to consummate the wedding, but it wouldn't happen for quite some time. Miscarriages and stillbirths followed her for many, many years with Anne, as we had just talked about a week ago. In 1634, she commissioned the building of the Val-de-Grâce Abbey and a church dedicated to the Virgin. Then she came with a prayer that she finally gave birth to an heir. On September 5th, 1638, Louis XIV was born after those 23 years of waiting. It was after a very stormy night in Paris in December of 1637, and Louis XIII was going to go to one of his other chateaus, and they ran into a huge storm, and so they turned back and came back to the Louvre. And supposedly, of the Louvre, the only bed to sleep in was hers, and so he did. And lo and behold, we have a king. However, some historians argue that the true father was Cardinal Mazarin. And I think that would be amazing because it'd be like the Da Vinci Code of French royalty, because then Louis XIV would have never been royal.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, if it wasn't working for 23 years, I'm not buying it.
I know. So maybe, maybe Cardinal Mazarin was where it was at. But there are historians that say he was in Italy at the time that little Louis would have been conceived, but still, I kind of like the idea. At the time after Louis the 13th died, she and little Louis XIV moved into the Palais Royal, and they lived there after 1643 until the Fronde happened and they had to flee Paris. She liked it because it was a little bit more modern and comforting. The young Louis XIV on January 6, 1689 is when they decided to return. Because of the Paix de Rouy, which is the Peace of Rouy, allowed their return. In 1649. Sorry, that last date should have been 1649. The court returned to the Palais Royal until September of 1651. Then they decided to move over to the Louvre. It hadn't really even been taken care of in 9 years, so it wasn't in very good shape. Going back to 1547, the apartments of the king and queen were on the first floor, the queen's were, of the pavilion. And then later, the king's rooms were next to that. And then they were eventually all taken apart and moved to the colonnade floor of the Louvre. long after they had all left. On October 13th, 1653, Louis XIV ordered the construction of the apartments for the holding of the council in the Louvre in the new Le Mercier wing of the Pavillon de Sully, and they needed to create new rooms for Anne of Austria. So Louis Laveau was tasked to create these, but Louis XIV, ever the very doting son that he also was completely involved. He was the original mama's boy, which might explain a lot about things here in France. But
I
there's
like
a
that,
lot
the
of
original Mama's Boy.
the original mama's boy. Um, and he wanted to do everything he could. He even had the rooms for his mother done before his own. How nice is that?
I think that was very considerate and
So
lovely.
considerate. The construction contract was dated March of 1655, March 19th, which again, we know Saint Joseph's Day. It's completed in 1658. The rooms were inaugurated on their own as they were done between 1657 and 1658. The paintings of these rooms were all based on mythology, history, and allegories. The god and goddesses were approved by the king and the queen's mother, and intentionally chosen. And I'll tell you about every one of them. She became very ill and she couldn't enjoy her updated apartment after it was expanded because she was constantly ill in 1663. But became better in 1664 in the summer. She threw a big ball in the Louvre, and it was a mass carnival in those rooms. In June of 1665, she began to convalesce with her family. August 23rd, 1665, Louis the 14th had been actually staying in those rooms, and he was very sick, and they did bloodletting on his foot, which is gross. And that was their, cure all for everything, was to bloodlet. She would die on January 20th, 1666. And then I will tell you in another episode what happened to these rooms after that. But these specifically are called the summer apartments of Anne of Austria because when you are the Queen Mother of France, you not only have a summer apartment wing, you have a winter apartment wing. And even though these were basically on the same exact floor, this one ends up, her bedroom is closer to the Seine. So in the summer, it was cooler because she'd get a little bit of breeze from the water.
That's like some nice planning they had
I
there.
know it's pretty nice planning. I mean, my apartment's pretty tiny. I'd be pretty happy with a whole wing of rooms.
I think I could handle it.
I think I'd be okay with that. Laveau had added a rotunda at the beginning of it to connect the old and the new parts. This rotunda that you would go through to see now was originally also the entrance when it became a museum in 1793. This was the actual entrance to come into the Louvre. You'd come into the rotunda, take a right, and go up the stairs to go into the museum. Later, these rooms in 1800 would become part of the Louvre as far as a museum. But the one really cool thing about these rooms is they are the only set of rooms in the Louvre that have maintained their original distinction. The ceilings, the way that they are, they've never been completely changed. They have parts of it have been a little bit redone in the 19th century, but you would never know that unless you were listening to me tell you right now. Because if you looked up, it all looks exactly the same artist.
Once again, bring this as your audio guide in 4 years.
In 4 years, exactly. So the reason we're saying that is because these rooms were closed since before COVID. They were being restored. Not only were they restoring the ceilings, but they were also putting in like new electricity and HVAC and bathroom and a elevator, all sorts of stuff, or updating all these things. And they finally had them finished, but it was opened in June of 2024 for a special exhibit about Italian sculptures. And it is closing. It closed January 6th, 2025 was the last day, and that thankfully was extended from November. But this is where they're going to put the new Byzantine department. So it's a whole new department, a ninth department of the Louvre that's going to be about the Byzantine art, and also the art of Christianity, and also hopefully returning the Roman sculptures to this room, which at one point it's going to be about 10 years since we saw any of those. But it's not supposed to open until 2027, 2028.
That's way too long.
I know, ridiculously long. But the seedlings in here are most of everything is done by two people. Artist Francesco Romanelli and a sculptor named Michael Anguille. Michael Anguille has a brother named Francois, who was also a sculptor that also has pieces in the Louvre. Michael had studied in Rome and created funerary monuments. He also worked at Vaux-le-Vicomte and the Val de Grace, which is again tied to Anne of Austria. Francesco Romanelli, Italian, obviously, he lived from 1610 to 1662. He was a student of Pierre de Corton. He had decorated the Galerie Mazarin, which is the Bibliothèque Nationale. That's just not very far from the Louvre, just up the way on Rue de Richelieu. And you can see some of those ceilings that he did in the exhibit space when they do an exhibit, but it's never lighted very well and it's kind of hard to see. But definitely go check that out. He also worked in the Hotel Lambert. And then these rooms for Anne of Austria. He was recommended by Cardinal Mazarin, the maybe father of Louis XIV. Look, we're just going to start that. And he had spent time in Rome when Pope Urban VII died in 1644. Pope Innocent X had spent time in Paris and told Mazarin about Romanelli. So he came up there and he was put to work. As I said, Louis XIV personally picked out exactly what Romanelli was going to do. It took 4 years to finish these rooms, which is less time than it's taking them to restore them.
I know that's pretty wild, right?
Exactly. I mean, they're restoring things with like Q-tips, but still. Another gentleman, Pietro Sasso, he created a lot of the ornamental frames in these rooms as like the stucco with a lot of the borders and everything that was going on in these rooms. And Ottavio Ottaviani did a lot of the gold gilding. The ceilings and everything are amazing. They did the ceilings all first, and then later they did the windows and the doors and the flooring. We're going to talk about a couple of the rooms this week, and then we'll finish off and tell you the last couple rooms and what those rooms have been in between Anne and today. The first one you're going to go into, and hopefully you'll still be able to walk through this because we could for a long time. They still have this as a passageway, so you could at least look up and see this gorgeous rotund. And this was done, as I said, by Louis Laveau. The decoration that we see today changed in the mid-19th century. The center of the painting is formed by Prometheus and animated by Minerva. This was done by Jean-Simon Barthélemy. He did this painting, but then there was a really bad water leak of some sort that destroyed almost all of it. And then in 1825, it was restored and pretty much repainted, but done exactly the same by Jean-Baptiste Mosier. It's a really cool painting when you look up at it. It has a goddess Minerva. She's holding a spear and a shield and an olive branch. Below her is Prometheus. He's the bearded gentleman draped in a red coat. He's armed with fire that he stole from Jupiter. And Prometheus gives life to the first human being, and he's this like naked man there, and was the first human. So this, I guess, is not Adam and Eve.
I like that. We're mixing it up.
We're mixing it up. There is some biblical stuff in here, but mostly it's mythological and allegorical. He's sitting on a base of the composition. Just next to him is Saturn, or could be Time. He's draped in blue. He's vigorously removes the snake that's there. That's the snake that's biting its own tail, which is a symbol of eternity. And he's deprive him of his immortality. The man created by Prometheus is a finite and deadly creature. Very interesting. So here you have all these gods, but now that they've created man, he's going to be the one that destroys people.
That's how it works.
I mean, it's not far off. time, above time, are the allegories of the three arts. They are for drawing. The painting is crowned with red roses, and she's holding a palette and brushes. Sculpture is crowned with a laurel wreath, and she's equipped with a hammer. And architecture is crowned with the immortals, and she's holding a compass. The presence recalls that Prometheus embodies the myth of the first artist. On the left, and this is one I really love, are the parks, which is also known as the Fates. And the Fates, when we get around, maybe that'll be my next massive project, is to finish the rooms of Marie de Medici. As you see the fates in one of the paintings, the fates are always three women. The first one is Nona. She is wearing blue flowers in her hair. She holds the tail of a gold spool of thread. Decima is the second. She's wearing a laurel wreath crown. She pulls the thread to measure it. And Marta, wearing myrtle leaf crown, holds the scissors to cut it. And so these three women are saying this is going to be the length of your life, your fate.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Like,
isn't that kind of cool?
I wish I had more time to see this before it closes, like forever.
Well, hopefully you'll be able to still see this one. When we go take your mom, I'll definitely make sure we could go down. And hopefully for a while they even had it so the room was blocked off, but you could still kind of look and see the part of the ceilings going down. So hopefully that's what they kind of do for this one, I hope. But as I said, these paintings originally done in 1825 were strongly destroyed by a water damage that came through. So then the original artist had already died. And so that is why Mosier decided they had him redo them. Also, what's also really amazing is when you look up to the ceiling, you'll see four medallions, oval medallions, and these are all white. And they represent four countries and sculpture, because as you came into the museum and you walked in here in 1800, these rooms became the Salle des Antiquaires. So they were all of the statuary. And so these were done by Jean-Francois Lorteau. He did these in the mid-19th century. They in the northwest corner is France, and it is of Pierre Puget with the Milan de Coton, which is a sculpture you could find in the Louvre. The southwest corner is Italy, and you have Michelangelo's Moses in the background. The northeast corner is Egypt, and it has a Egyptian statue in it. And then the other corner, the southeast corner, is Greece, and it has the Apollo Belvedere. They're really, really cool. And when I tell you it took me days to find that information, it's an understatement.
Oh man, it's not much out there on that one.
The problem with the ceilings of the Louvre is some pieces actually have an inventory number, so you could kind of eventually find something, but some things like sculptures on the ceiling, none of that stuff has it inventory.
Yeah, they don't make it easy.
They don't make it easy. But it's a thrill of the chase, I guess. On either side is also other medallions. On the north side, over what would have been the door, is a genie of art. And then on the south side is the union of the three arts. And it's interesting, usually at this period of time, you only see three arts. But when we get into the 19th century and Napoleon III, it's four arts, because it also adds engraving in there. But this early, because of this time that they're depicting, engraving wasn't a art yet.
That's fascinating. It wasn't even an art yet.
No, it wasn't even one. The next room, the first room when you come into that, were kind of the beginning of her apartments. Up on the ceiling is a painting in the very center by Charles Meunier, and was done in 1802. This was at the time of Napoleon. It's land receiving from the emperors Hadrian and Justinian the code of Roman laws. There's going to be a lot of Roman references in these rooms, and dictated to by nature, to justice and wisdom. There's a blue sky on it. It's really beautiful, with the Roman emperors below, Hadrian and Justinian, and they're painted on the bottom left-hand corner. They have laurel wreath crowns, of course. And Hadrian is handing to Earth, who's sitting in front of him, a tablet that's depicting the edict and the Justinian Code. The allegory of Earth bears a cranial wall crown and is draped in green, and at her feet is a lion and a cornucopia, so it's showing you the riches. At the center is also an allegory of imperial Rome, dressed in a short orange tunic and a blue coat, and holds a spear with her right hand and a golden globe topped with winged victory on her left hand. She has a shield that, of course, says Rome. There's two putis that watch over it. There's also the allegory of nature, which is a woman with untied hair. She's on the edge of the painting. And she's also has several pairs of breasts, not just two. She has 4 breasts.
As one does, you know.
As one does. The top of the composition is Minerva, who's the goddess of wisdom, and Themis, who's the goddess of justice. And in addition to nature, the great principles that inspired Roman laws. Lots of stuff going on in these, and there'll be lots of bare breasts too.
Yeah, I feel like every time I have customers, they're like, why are there so many naked statues everywhere?
Well, part of that is because it is a symbol of charity and also a symbol of motherhood. So, like when you see Liberty Leading the People that we've talked about before by Delacroix, it's her, it's kind of showing that it's motherhood and that, you know, she is the birth of all of these things.
Well, now I'm going to tell them that when their kids are like,
Now you
Mom,
can tell.
why are you naked?
Why is all that? Yeah. And there's sometimes that I had my nephew one time with a book I had of sculpture, and it was a male sculpture on the front and it was naked. He's like, that's inappropriate. I'm like, that's art.
No, it's so funny. You're not allowed to show any naked stuff in the States.
No, yeah, definitely not. I mean, in France, you see like little tiny kids as school groups coming and sitting in front of these sculptures, or the Origin of the World painting that's in the Orsay, and just you could look that up to see what that is. It's a part of the female anatomy, very close up. But back to our room. So in this room, there's 3 agate cameos, and it's a trompe l'oeil, and they are done by an artist that when we talked months and months ago about the Napoleon III apartment in the Louvre, we also mentioned this artist, Victor Francois Bienoury. He did all of these trompe l'oeil cameos. On the north side is science, and the south side is study. And then he has 3 other ones that he did that are really cool. So the one, when you look up, that is facing west or east, is the Roman sculpture, and that is all about Rome. So it has an allegory of Roman sculpture, and you also see behind it the Roman Forum, the Arch of Titus, and the foreground, the pyramid of Cestius as well. And then on the other side, you have Greek, and that is Greek sculpture. You see Zeus and throning, and close to Zeus is Olympia, sculpted by Phidias, and then you see the Acropolis of Athens. But on the west side, we have French sculpture, and of course, this was my favorite. The French allegory is holding the monument for the heart of Henry II by Pilon, that's also held in the Louvre. There is a little putti, the little genus, that is inscribing on a tablet the name of 4 of the greatest French sculptors, Goujon, Pilon, Cousin, and Puget. And then above that, there is an F, and it's around the necklace of the Order of St. Michael. The F is for Francois Premier. And on the other side is an N for Napoleon III, and he is the necklace of the Order of the Legion of Honor, which is, of course, what Napoleon Bonaparte would set up. And then you see the roofs of the Louvre and the Tuileries. There's also 4 medallions in here representing the rivers. And this is another thing. I don't know why these medallions were really the ones really giving me a problem in the last 6 months of research. I was really difficult, and I just had to do process of elimination on these. They are really cool. These medallions almost look like they could be bronze or they could be wood, but they're all done with stucco and painted. On the north side, on the northeast, you have the Eridan, which is a Greek river, and on the northwest side, you have the Rhine, which is the European river. On the south side, you have the Nile, that's Egypt, and then on the east side and on the west side, you have the Tiber, which is Roman. That was the easiest one to be able to spot and figure out. But if they're really amazing, and hopefully you can still see the ceilings. Today we'll talk about the next room, and then we'll save the other ones for next week. But the second room is the salle de saison. This was the antechamber, so it meant this is where they had to come to wait to see the queen. So the ceiling is all about time. This ceiling as well inspired Charles Lebrun to create the entire ceiling in the room above us, which is the Galerie des Palais, which is where the royal crown jewels are kept. It is the room that inspired Versailles, but it all came originally from Anne of Austria.
And now you guys have to go see it in a couple of years.
Yeah. So this room, when you look up on the ceiling, in the very center is a kind of an octagon little painting, and it represents Diane and Apollo. Diane and Apollo were brothers and sisters, and Apollo represents the sun, and Diane is the goddess of the moon. So again, time. They are up there in the very middle. And then starting on the southeast corner, going around in the corners of this room, it's about the seasons. So you have spring, that's a young woman that's just awakening. In the center is a painting that is Diane is surprised in her bath by Actiton, who transformed into a stag, and his antlers are beginning to grow out of his head. And then in the corner, you have Summer, which is a figure that is sleeping, as what we would expect to be a very hot day. In the center of that is Apollo that is challenging Marseillaise to the music contest, and he loses, and this is just before he's tortured. In the corner again, we have Autumn, which is a handsome young gentleman that's kind of crowned, and you see vine branches because Autumn is usually always represented with wine grapes and ivy branches. In the center of those is also Apollo crowning the muses. And then in a corner, we have, of course, Winter, who's always an old man that's kind of warming himself next to a fire. And then we have Diane, and she attends to her chariot while the nymphs are looking at the sleeping Endymion. There's also 4 medallions in here. These, as I said, the medallions are trying to kill me. I really love these ones as well because these are the 4 elements. And so with the 4 elements, they're all represented by mythological figures. The south side first is on the east side, you see fire, which is Vulcan. He's forging lightning. And on the southwest side, you have Cybele, who is representing the earth, and she's seated with a lion. On the north side, on the east, you have Juno with her peacock. She represents air. And on the west side, you have Neptune with his seahorse, and he represents water. Isn't that cool?
I think that's really cool. I love all the symbolism and like, I don't know. It's just like I wish we still did that in art today. There was more of that. It seems like
I
most
know. I mean, the fact that it took them as long as it did to restore it, it's just, I don't, and the cost of these kinds of things. But I'll have all of these pictures on my website. I also went through and did a whole big video for YouTube, so you could see all of it as well. And I kind of was doing the video just as much for me, so I could see it over the next few years. On either side of the painting of Diana and Apollo are, again, some of those bronze. And these ones, they're just like long rectangulars. One is there's a genie of time with an hourglass and a clock. And then on the other side is a genie with a year, which is symbolized by the signs of the zodiac, which is pretty cool. Around in between all of the paintings, you have dancing fawns on the east and west and caryatides on the north and south. There's golden garlands in stucco that were done by Pietro Sasso in 1656. Of course, the sculptures were all done by Michael Angier, and then the gold paneling by Etienne Carriel. But it's I love this ceiling, and to know that this ceiling inspired the entire or the Galerie des Palais is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, definitely go check out the video, guys, on her website because it's worth seeing, and then we can all see it in person one day too.
Yeah, and I will put pictures of each one of these on my website so you could see them all as well. And so you don't want to miss that because talking about them is great, but you got want to see it too. Because like you said, we don't do things like this anymore. There's also, of course, when you go to Versailles, you see lots of this kind of stuff, but you don't necessarily know what it is that you're looking at and which one of these things it represents. And, if you do this enough and you look at these things, you will be able to start picking these things out. Now I could look at a lot of things and know who it is by an attribute or some little thing that they have on it. But of course, not everything because you've got Roman, you've got Greek gods, you have allegories, you have all of these things. But it's really fun to try to figure it all out.
And now you guys know why the art is naked in France. You can tell everybody.
This is why you see boobs.
All right, guys, head over to ClaudineHemingway.com and make sure you tune in next week.
Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.